Hey everyone, and welcome. So let's just jump right in. Have you ever really thought about what a book is? I mean, beyond just the story. What if, when you pick up a novel, you're not just holding a story, but a product? Something shaped by history, by economics, by power? Well, today we're going to look at literature through a completely different lens, using the ideas of a really influential critic, Terry Eagleton.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll touch on the three core principles that everything else is built on. Then, we'll get into this wild idea of literature as a product. From there, we'll explore how ideology becomes a kind of battleground for our minds, look at Eagleton's take on other theories, and then, finally, we'll get to the real goal of this whole way of thinking, which is all about emancipation.
All right, first things first, we have to lay the groundwork, because to really get what Eagleton's doing with literature, we have to start with the foundational ideas of Marxism that, for him, are totally non-negotiable.
And this question right here, this is the one that really frames everything we're about to talk about. Just think about that for a second. We usually think of art as, this pure thing that just flows from some genius's mind. But this whole perspective challenges that. It asks us to see a book as something forged in the real material world. Something shaped by the very society that it came from.
And our guide for this whole deep dive is Terry Eagleton. He's a really prominent British critic who spent his entire career re-examining literature through a modern Marxist framework, a huge voice in this field. Okay, so this is absolutely crucial. Eagleton's entire theory stands on these three pillars. First, the idea that our consciousness, our beliefs, our morals, even our feelings, it doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It's shaped by our real material lives. Second, that the engine of history, the thing that drives it forward, is class struggle. And third, and this is a big one, he insists on a commitment to political revolution. This isn't just about thinking, it's about linking theory directly to action. All right, so we have these big foundational ideas, but how in the world does this connect to a poem or a novel? Let's take a look at how Eagleton builds that bridge.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. When most of us hear means of production, we think of factories, machines, assembly lines. But Eagleton says, hang on, there's another, maybe even more important kind of production going on. The production of us. The production of human subjectivity, our thoughts, our feelings, our very sense of who we are.
And boom, this is where literature comes in. See, for Eagleton, literature isn't just some passive mirror reflecting society. No way. It's an active part of this whole machine. Think about a novel by, say, Charles Dickens. It's not just a good story. It's a product of industrial capitalism in Victorian England. The poverty, the class system, all the anxieties of the characters, they are all shaped by the material world of that time. So in this view, the novel itself helps produce a certain way of understanding that world. This leads us right into one of the most critical concepts in this entire analysis, ideology. Because if our minds are being shaped and produced, then the fight over what is doing the shaping is everything.
So what even is ideology in this context? Well, you can think of it as the glue between the real material world and our inner mental world. It's that whole system of beliefs and values that makes the current power structure seem, normal, natural, inevitable. Its job is to create ways of seeing the world that, in the end, keep the dominant political order in charge.
And this quote from Eagleton just hits so hard. It really drives the point home. The toughest battle isn't out there on a battlefield. It's inside our own heads. The real struggle is to free that space of subjectivity, our inner world, which, he argues, has basically been colonized by the ruling ideology.
Now, Eagleton wasn't just coming up with these ideas in a bubble. He was in conversation and in debate with other big literary theories of his day, and he had some pretty sharp critiques for them.
So here's his main beef, laid out pretty clearly. Eagleton looked at other radical theories, like structuralism, and saw a huge problem. They often treated books like these self-contained little puzzles, totally ignoring the world outside the page. For Eagleton, that was a massive failure. By not connecting literature back to the real-world struggles of economics and society, he argued that these theories, no matter how smart they sounded, just became an academic game. And in doing that, they actually unintentionally helped prop up the very system they claimed they were against.
So why? Why do all this? What is the ultimate point of looking at literature this way? Well, it all boils down to one single powerful goal.
And there it is, stated as plainly as it can be. For Eagleton, literary criticism is not some passive, dusty academic thing. Its primary task is political.
It is meant to be a tool, something you use to actively help free people, to take part in what he calls the cultural emancipation of the masses. But that wasn't the end of the story. You know, thinkers keep thinking, and as the world changed, Eagleton's ideas evolved too. In a later book called After Theory, he offered up a really important warning for a new era. He basically said that while the old tools were vital, they just weren't enough to tackle the new challenges we're all facing. He argued that, look, while the big narratives of class, race, and gender are absolutely indispensable, we can't forget them, theory can't just be a broken record. If we're going to get a real handle on our incredibly complex global reality, we need a wider, deeper set of tools to think with. We can't afford to only tell the same stories over and over again.
And that leaves us with a really provocative question, doesn't it? If we take Eagleton's challenge seriously, what are the powerful hidden stories shaping our world right now that we haven't even learned to see yet? What are the forces, beyond the ones we always talk about, that are busy producing our subjectivity, right here, right now? It's a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us.